This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business. Welcome to Confronting the Line, where we discuss the world of personal development, transformation, and we sometimes get into the real nitty-gritty of times when that doesn't really work out. And I'm here. My name is Mark Tafoya. I'm here with our wonderful host, Ann L. Peterson, who is author of the book, Is This a Cult? And you can get that at isthisaccultbook.com. If you haven't already. Most of the people who are listening to us have heard of Ann. And we're just so excited to be having this podcast series. Good morning, Ann.
Morning. Good to see you.
And yeah, always great to see you. And we're here today. We're joined on with a wonderful guest who we've been looking forward to having. Our guest is Chris Shelton, the notorious Chris Shelton, who is just a real voice in this conversation of, hey, is this a good thing? Is this not such a good thing? What's up? What happened? Chris, from a very early age, was a Scientologist, was in the Church of Scientology from, I believe, the age of 17, and then very quickly rose up, was in the Sea Org, the very famous Sea Org, and then very famously left the Church of Scientology, and since then has been very active in helping himself and others to deconstruct the world of what they got into, and has also been a voice for people who have been involved in other organizations that may or may not be exerting undue control in people's lives. So welcome, Chris. Thanks. Nice to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much, and great intro. Thank you.
Chris, I'm dying to know what Sea Org, did you ever actually go on the boat?
I did not.
Ahoy, matey.
I did not. They have a boat. I didn't go on it.
You didn't even get one of those cute little Captain and Tennille hats?
Yeah, we did have the uniforms, and we did have, I even had a throwing dirk, and ranks and everything, but I never got over to the boat.
Wow.
Okay. You were never a swabby.
Yes. An able-bodied seaman.
Well, Chris has been one of my favorite people to talk with, one, because we could just nerd out for hours on ideas and distinctions and how-abouts and what-ifs. So you'll probably hear a bit of that today, folks, because that's what it's like when Chris and I get together. But also for me, I was always so proud that I didn't get involved in Scientology, despite when I was in, 19 and 20 years old, some invitations and so on. I'm pretty sure I did the personality test thing and whatnot, but it just creeped me out. Being a good Christian girl, I was like, no, that's devil worship, or whatever I thought. I don't even know. And, but I was always just so proud that I never got involved with Scientology. And, but then instead, of course, I get deeply involved in Landmark, but that was fine because that's a seminar company. It's not a cult, it's a seminar company. And of course I had and we came in the time when Werner had been completely erased, other than as this sort of historical figure, and that our work was based on his ideas, but he was supposedly completely gone, something I know now to not be true. But at the time, so we didn't have any of that. And then I think it was my first clue, besides all the years of people saying, wait, isn't that a cult? And then me having to answer why it's not. A red flag, by the way, folks. If it comes up, here's my rule. If it comes up more than 3 times, pay attention. That's God talking. Do you know, or your angels in some way. So, but I didn't. I would answer with the corporate Q&A. No, it's not a cult. These are all the reasons why, and so on. And, but also still just really proud it wasn't Scientology. And I used to say that sometimes. It's not like Scientology, because people would say, isn't it like, I'm like, no, it's not like, doesn't have anything to do with Scientology. In fact, there's this whole story about how Werner was taken out in the 90s, had nothing to do with his own proclivities, his own abuse of his team and his staff and all of those things, the numerous lawsuits, the tax problems, et cetera, but rather that he was declared, I think it's Squirrel, is that the right term, Chris? Something by Scientology, and supposedly there were death threats and all this kind of crazy stuff. So the inside Landmark story always was that it was the Scientologist that ruined Werner's career, that ruined his reputation and so on. So, all sounded good to me. Why not? But either way, Scientology was the devil. And then Going Clear came out, the movie. And I watched about a third of it, and right when it came out, and then I had to turn it off because I was like, whoa, this is way too familiar. This is way like, well, and even just the term clear. As you but for years we're like, Mark, are you ready to clear for your intro? Clear, like the term
and I'm really messed up right now. I need you to clear me.
It still comes out of my mouth, actually, from time to time. Oh, I'm clearing this right now. And then now that I know what that means, I am, working very hard to get it out of my language. But it was just that part. It's when the movie got to that, and I'm like, I can't watch this. And I literally just watched it. The final part of it, like 3 weeks ago. And that was mostly because I had started talking with Chris and started to learn all the ways in which absolutely landmark programs have a very deep and long history with Scientology. How about you, Chris? What have I thought that would be a fun place. I'd love to hear just a little bit about your story. Anything you want to let us know about your story with Scientology and leaving and so on, and then we can look a little more at some of the similarities.
Absolutely, sure. So I grew up in Scientology, actually, and so I was around it my whole life. My parents got in when I was about 4, and I went to public school, had a regular kind of life, house, car, pets, all that kind of stuff. Growing up, I wasn't one of the Sea Org kids who was they received the real childhood abuse in Scientology, but there's enough spread around. I don't mean to demean anybody else's experience by saying something like that, because there's a lot of public Scientologists who had some pretty bad upbringings as well. I just fortunately wasn't one of them.
Yeah.
But when I was 15, I started doing Scientology services, and when I was 17 is when I actually started working for the church. Right out of high school, they recruited me.
Yeah.
And I did that for 8 years in Santa Barbara, California, at the church there. And then when I was 25 years old, doubled down. We're going to save the world. And I joined the Sea organization. And that's the billionyear contract, people, if you've heard about that, or, those big blue buildings in Los Angeles. That's where I lived and worked all day, every day. That's a Sea Org base. And it's a paramilitary kind of outfit. And so I did that for 17 years. So 25 years total working for the church. And then in 2012, I left the church as an employee, you could say. And in 2013, I left the entire headspace. I got on the internet. I went down the rabbit holes. I learned everything. And I mentally got, out. And it took that year, 2013, to kind of physically get out as well, where I was finally disconnected and declared suppressive by the church formally, which means they kick you out and label you, and no Scientologist in good standing can speak with you or have anything to do with you. And so I lost everybody overnight. And so
it's basically excommunication. What it would be excommunication in other churches.
Exactly.
Right?
Actually, it's actually stronger than Catholic excommunication in so many ways.
Yeah.
It is an absolute severance of all ties now and forever. And if you're working with Scientologists, you got to quit. If you're family with Scientologists, you're not family anymore. It's absolute. There's no more holidays. There's no more anything with your friends who are Scientologists. None of it. So I was cut out of, all my social network. And so I've been building that back up. And then I spent the last 10 years educating myself, learning about this, and sharing my journey on YouTube, basically, and learning and trying to pass that on to people. And that's pretty much what my life is about.
That's great. I mean, and I've learned a lot from your videos, so I'm super appreciative. And
mission accomplished.
Yay! Yeah, there's a lot of us. I promise. There's a lot of people out there listening and whatnot. I'm curious, when you left, did you you always hear this sort of lore of people being chased down, of people being spied on, but did you experience any of that kind of stuff?
Yes, I have been. Have had my activities monitored for years by the church. I live in Denver. There's a local Denver church here, and they know who I am, and they keep track of me. But I have managed to avoid a lot of the worst of what they call fair gaming. That's what Scientology does. That's how they label you. Your fair game. We can do anything we want to you. So they'll go through your garbage. They'll follow you. They'll send private investigators after you, stuff like that. Fortunately, like I said, I've managed to avoid most of that because higher level, Leah Remini, Mike Rinder, these are the guys who are taking the hard hits so that I don't have to, really, because Scientology is really directed at them hardest with a lot of that stuff. I have a hate website up about me. My ex-wife trashes me on video. I've got they offered to buy my YouTube channel once. That was kind of interesting. They wanted to shut me down. So I've had stuff like that happen.
Gotcha. So did you break with
an interesting bit of doublespeak.
Go ahead, Mark. Sorry,
Ann. Well, I'm just saying it's a really interesting bit of doublespeak to say fair game, right? To we're gonna like it's a funny phrase, right? Oh, you're fair game, but it's anything but fair,
exactly,
right? So it's a little bit of double speaky, sort of speak.
One of 1,000 such phrases in Scientology. You're absolutely right. Yeah. That's a good point. Nobody's ever brought that up before. That's a good point.
Well, you know what else I hear is it's a bit of a precursor. Now there's all this nonsense. Really, I think it's nonsense about cancel culture. Mostly because I find the main people screaming about cancel culture are the people who likely should be canceled because they're doing inappropriate and harmful things. So I find that very interesting that that's who's screaming kind of the highest about it. And, cancel culture, But, this is kind of another version of it. When you leave a group like that, you are canceled, as you're cut off. And it sounds like, did you leave? Were you still with your wife? And then was it the break with Scientology that had you break with your wife as well? I mean, did it go that deep?
Yes. My marriage when I was in the Sea Org had pretty much already fallen apart by the time I left. That was one of the reasons that I had stayed for so long, was I loved my wife and I wanted that marriage to work, but it shouldn't have worked, and it wasn't a good marriage. So that kind of fell apart, and various other things happened that were nails in the coffin that got me to wake up. It was a 10-year process of waking up from it, of like realizing what the group was that I was part of, and getting away from that. And the marriage was just another casualty of that whole activity. It never marriages in the Sea Org are rough. Because the priority is all about the work. It's not about your marriage or your relationships or your family. And it's certainly not about having kids, because you can't have kids. They control sex in Scientology.
That was the interesting part.
Yeah, you can't have sex till you're married in the Sea Org, and you can't have kids.
Really? So, and that's another thing they
kind of borrowed from the Catholic Church, right? Like, they didn't want the Catholic Church didn't want priests getting married because they didn't want anyone to have claim on property.
Right.
As primogeniture. So that's where it came from in the Catholics. I'm curious where it came from in Scientology, what's their justification for saying you shouldn't be having kids?
There were 2 generations of children raised in the Sea Org when they were able to have kids, who were a PR disaster and nightmare for Scientology, because the Sea Org didn't set up competent facilities to care for these kids. And it was 2 full generations, 70s and 80s, and actually into the 90s, before they shut it down, where the child care facilities were cockroach infested horror shows. And there are many anecdotal stories and testimonials from those kids who survived and grew up and learned how to read and write and all that, who exposed their upbringing, and it was awful. And so that's why Scientology shut it down.
So interesting. So rather than actually invest the money, which, Scientology is very wealthy, real estate wealthy for sure, but rather than invest the money, this is something else I see common to these kind of high control groups, right? That are in service of something, right? So somebody else's, in Landmark's case, it's Werner's influence and Werner's reputation. But that rather than actually create facilities that work, like clean up the daycare and, it's done all over the world.
Take care of the kids.
So rather than that, concept. We go, okay, no kids. It's just so interesting how these organizations double down. And, Landmark is known as kind of Scientology light amongst the Scientologists. And I've now talked to enough of y'all and heard stories to get that. Like, I really do think we were Nexium. Sarah told me that Nexium also related to, they were like a fine steakhouse, and Nexium was the fine steakhouse. Landmark was the McDonald's. But I'll tell you for sure, in the Landmark world, Nexium was the ripoff. It was just some kook that ripped it off and was doing a bunch of wrong things with it and so on. But in terms of Scientology, definitely I would say Landmark had a lighter version, because I've now heard from, I think I'm up to 8 staff members, people who were on staff with the organization, women, and when they got pregnant, they were either, in a couple of cases, explicitly told to get an abortion, or strongly implied, like, well, if you're going to be a mom, you can't be on staff. But that had a whole price, as it did in my own life. So for those that have read my book, you know that my daughter paid the highest price of my participation, as she was in care environments that were not safe. We thought they were safe. They were actually with Landmark graduates, so we thought they were extra safe. And and with her dad, yeah. So it's interesting that they just, rather than actually deal with the problem, they duck and hide. And we see that a lot with Landmark too. And they get sued for labor violation after labor violation. The Department of Labor comes in 3-4 times and says, hey, this program you're running does not conform to U.S. labor law. But rather than end the program, until they absolutely had to in September 30th of 2022, they just double down. Even cost them business operations in countries, in France, in Sweden, and they just ignored it, just found a way to manipulate and maneuver around it, rather than like, well, why don't we examine the foundation? Why don't we examine what we're actually doing here? That seems to be missing in these kinds of groups, any kind of self reflection or self-examination. Landmark puts on a big show about it.
Have rules? Why would a country have laws about this? Let's see. Does it serve people, or is it just there to get it and go against us? Right, which would probably be the the example they would say. Oh, that exists to mess with us.
Well, the Landmark joke is always, because Landmark is so about, it is secular, it is for everybody, and it is, it's one of the fundamental tenets is, without integrity, nothing works. And yet they operate with very little integrity. And then when things aren't working, rather than looking at the integrity, they actually go looking at who they're being. And they have endless meetings where we sit around and, take all the things in the past that supposedly haven't worked, except for all the really main things that are hidden in the vault. All the lawsuits and the employment claims and all that stuff never seems to make it onto the table of things that don't work. And, and then, all this other whatever. I mean, I've sat through a few of those meetings. I barely remember them, thank God. Probably my brain protecting me. But, and then they come out with some whole new possibility, new brand. Yeah. Did you have something you want to add?
I just was curious if you agreed. I'm thinking that Werner and L. Ron Hubbard shared a kind of uncaring. I think animosity might even be too strong a word. I think it's just a toxic level of uncaring about their own family and children. And do I remember right that Werner abandoned his family?
Both families, ultimate. I mean,
the story goes that he had originally just abandoned his family before he was transformed, before he had worked anything out. I guess when he was a salesman or something, he just left his family, just up and left, just took off, all that. Yeah. And then, and then the famous apocryphal story of he has this transformation driving across the Golden Gate Bridge, and he creates everything that he's creating, and he creates a new family, has a new wife and all this, and just that other family just didn't exist, supposedly, right? At least as I understand it, right?
Well, sort of. So
he just kind of left it completely.
He'd already by all accounts, and for me, most of this information comes from Outrageous Betrayal by Steve Pressman, is the clearest accounting. And here's the thing, a lot of people go like, oh, but that was influenced by Scientology. I'm like, well, so what? The data is the data. Even if it came from Scientology private investigators, what they found is still what they found. It doesn't change the validity of what they found just because assholes found it, or a competitive force paid for, bad or disinformation doesn't change the nature of the information. So outrageous betrayal is the most well-sourced because most of it comes from court documents and firsthand accounts and so on. And, but basically he had already started up with his second wife, before he left, and she got pregnant, and, he had her kind of in a house down the street sort of thing, way before this was popular. So where you have the two polygamy and all that. So anyway, and then they decide to leave. So they leave. I think that was Ellen. I always confuse which one's which, but I think Ellen is the second wife. So anyway, they leave and start driving across the country and so on. And so he really had started the second family long before his, epiphany, which even he, if you watch the movie Transformation, he even downplays that whole bridge story now. But anyway, and then he, he's a salesman. He's a crafter. Chris, you were talking to me the other day about it. Kind of all starts when you look back all the way into the mid 1800s with the sort of flim flam men, right? Say a little bit about that. It was really great when you said that to me the other day. Like,
let me get into that. I've got to finish this point about Hubbard and Werner, though.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry, I lost track.
It's no. I was asking about that, and thank you for telling me all that stuff because I didn't actually know.
Yeah.
And it actually makes it even worse because it makes the parallels between Hubbard and Werner even stronger. Because if you know L. Ron Hubbard's story, he was married to two women at the same time for a year that neither one of them knew about each other. And he got the second woman pregnant and then married her while he's still married and has two kids with a woman up in Washington State. This is all right after and around or after World War II, when he's kicking around in California. So then they find out about each other, and then there's a divorce, and then he basically abandons her and goes off and has his third and final wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, who he does Scientology with. And I think he had a total of about 7 kids, Hubbard did. And he was a negligent father who never paid any attention to them.
Yep.
And when he did, if it was only to what good they could do for him.
Exactly.
And we had them working for him. And one of them committed suicide, and Hubbard's response in the early 70s to that was, "What's that kid done to me now?" Right? Like, this was his attitude about this.
Yeah.
So I bring all this up because if my explanation for why children are so abused and knocked about and ignored, or even, or alienated or abandoned by their parents in these groups, is because that sort of anti-child, completely self-absorbed attitude of these men filters on down the line, even at a subconscious level. It's little comments, it's little things, it's an entire attitude. So of course these are the kind of men who are not going to invest in the future because they don't actually care about the future. They just make sounds as though they do because that's what convinces other people to give them more money.
That's the product.
And you can always recruit more adults into the thing rather than having to have the children come up through the ranks. Like, that's harder because they're going to get rebellious at some point too, because that's what children do. That's right. Better to just have adults be compliant.
That most of them don't actually. Yeah. So you have a whole problem on your hands. With that. Anyway,
that's really interesting. Very, very similar. What I've seen mostly since my book came out. So my book, in a way, I mean, some people find this interesting, or probably will try and call me a liar, but I'm me. And I can assure you that part of my reason for publishing the book was a love letter to the graduates and a warning to Landmark to stop tying their ship back up to Werner. Because in my world, when I came in, it had all been separated. And then about 2015 or so, he started working with them again, which, fine if he's consulting a little bit in the background. Like, I didn't think that was a problem until by 2019. And I was so integrated in his inner circle to see the abuse that was happening. but also to see the constant nonsensical spin of him selling them the same ideas over and over and over and over. And, you know, and Landmark staff and ex-staff are stockholders. You know, that's their retirement is depending on that. So originally when I wrote the book, it was kind of as a warning and a nod to the future that I see as possible in making the self-development space more safe and more ethical in general. And I honestly thought Landmark could be leaders in that. Now, since the book's come out, and I've had hundreds of people now come to me and tell me story after story after story after story of emotional, spiritual, physical, verbal abuse, and devastating impacts even of the programs, you know, my view has really shifted. But one of the biggest things I've seen is that what I had recognized as the culture around Werner, the founder, the source, so as he's known in the Landmark circles, he's the source. Whether he's involved or not, it doesn't actually take his involvement. He'd already so mapped in the conversation that all roads lead to Werner. He's the source of anything and everything good, not the bad stuff. That's not. I mean, it's true, complete narcissistic personality traits, right? Is the good stuff belongs to them. The bad stuff is because of the assholes that aren't recreating them correctly. But what's interesting is the culture around Werner, his personality became the culture of the organization. And
my point.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, do you see that too? It's like the leader's personality becomes the culture of whatever group system that they are the leader of.
Exactly. That's the literal definition of a cult of personality. Right. That guy's personality imbues the entire activity, and these are started as cults of personality. They're around this guy and making the man out to be some higher form of life or more intelligent or more this or more that. And, you know, he's the guru, the savior figure, right?
Right.
That's why I hate Tony Robbins. You know, I'm not your guru. Bullshit, man. You're such a liar.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
All right. Again, what better way to make yourself a guru by to say, I'm not a guru.
I know.
Exactly. Don't listen to me. But I'm going to tell you something really great, but don't listen to me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a big piece. Jeez. Well, before we get into our weaponizing empath, which is something we really want to talk about today, I do want to just spend a little bit of time. I thought it'd be kind of fun for us to do a little bit of Landmark Scientology comparing. And
Red Sox versus Yankees.
Yeah, well, it's super fun. Chris and I have been texting back and forth. It's like, what do you think about this? What do you think about, and how this is how this is in Scientology? Where is this in Landmark? And pretty much everything we've been able to find a pretty obvious correlation. And I don't think it's all because Werner and team copied Scientology, which they were quite complimentary of, actually. And all the way up to the William Bartlett, his biography, he's quite complimentary about Scientology. It wasn't until Scientology's reputation started to disintegrate that he started to distance himself. Before that, he was very acknowledging of Scientology. And from what I understand, he and the folks that were on his MLM team for selling the books were very involved. That's where they got involved with Scientology, was to be more effective in their business, in the book selling business. So, but anyway, and then when he gets the lineage, as I understand it, then he actually meets the Mind Dynamics guy, gets the rights to deliver. He gets the franchising rights for Mind Dynamics for like California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii or something like that. And then he starts doing Mind Dynamics, and then he decides to mush it all together and create his own thing, which becomes EST. Right. So that's kind of like the quick lineage.
Throw a little bit of Eastern stuff in there to make it.
Well, that comes later.
Put some Buddhism
when he meets
in
Muktananda.
there.
So that comes.
Oh, that wasn't in the.
That was not in the beginning.
Okay.
No. So from what because I now have all these old Estes like telling me the stories, which I'm totally loving. I'm like the granddaughter sitting around like, tell me these stories, right? It's so great.
Yeah, it's interesting, huh?
It's really
tell me about the good old days
of what you were part of.
Yeah, it's fascinating and absolutely fascinating. But anyway, so here's what I put it into AI, Chris, and I thought we could talk about each one of these points. It was hilarious. I said, is Scientology different than Landmark? Landmark Forum and Scientology are different in their practices and beliefs, but both have been involved in controversy, it said. This was Google Gemini, which I've been playing with. So the first one thing it brought up was practices. It says Landmark Forum is based on transformative learning, which aims to help people understand the structures that shape their thoughts, actions, and knowledge. Scientology's main practice is auditing, which aims to help adherents reach a state of clear where they are free from the influences of their reactive mind.
Mm-hmm. Accurate.
Right? So I thought that was kind of interesting, except what I would say is the Landmark person is how the transformative learning that's referring to is getting clear of the barriers to your self-expression.
Exactly.
So,
but it's done more in a group setting than a one-on-one like Scientology is done. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it has to be framed, certainly by AI of all things, as a learning experience versus a processing or counseling experience, which is what Scientology is offering, and frames it that way. So people use words like counseling to describe Scientology, even though really, if we're being honest, amongst us girls, it's just concentrated hypnotism. So that's really what it is.
Well, so I don't know if I've shared this with you. So I worked in this special kind of division called the Wisdom Division, which was based on, we were always told was based on consulting services, which I learned recently is a term, I probably from you, a Scientology term, actually. And what was very different about the area that I spent the majority, not all of my career with Landmark, but the majority of it was our job was to listen in a way, listen such that whoever was speaking, whatever it was for them to work out, they would work out in the course of their own speaking, and to listen in a way that whatever their concerns were or barriers were would disappear. So my joke is I'm a trained e-meter.
That's not far off, because the word in Scientology for the counselor is auditor, which comes from audit, to listen, audio, right? To listen. And Hubbard's all about how auditors have to sit there and listen and compute and understand and give the commands or the questions and get the person through whatever process they're doing.
Yeah.
And it's a very assembly line kind of activity, like Landmark. There aren't, lots and lots and lots of variations to the theme. This is the path. You walk the path. You're going to be awesome at the end of the path, right?
Yeah. You made a decision at some point. What did you decide? Figure that out, and then let go of that decision and step into possibility. Right. I mean, at least in the Landmark side of it, right?
That's right.
Everyone had an event happen when you were 4 or 5. It was different for everyone, but we all decided something about ourselves. That's how the group part of it has. And then you sit there in your chair and you go, oh yeah, that time that mom did this and then my brother did that, I decided that I'm not important, right? And then I live my life, the rest of my life, I'm not important. So I had to make up for that, right? So each person individually in their chairs kind of figures it out. But it is like this kind of group. Everyone had an event. Yeah, everyone had an event that happened around a certain age. Think back. What was a traumatic thing that happened at that age,
Wow. How interesting. Because it's probably pulling some of that out of stages of development psychology and then turning it into something weird, Like, because there are things that people are going to commonly experience, or at least we hope they do as they go through stages of development. But then you take that and you go, oh, remember this? Yeah, that's ruined your entire life, right? Oh, okay, of course it did. Yeah.
Well, I think
they literally have people say, yeah, I'm the one who did that, right? Like a minute ago, you said everything good versus everything bad. There's a thing in there where it says like, literally everything good about you. Stop blaming your parents. Everything good about your life is because of them. They provided a roof over your head. They fed you. They loved you. They did all this. And everything bad that happened, that's on you. You have to be responsible for that. You decided that you would do this, this, and this. And then you went off and reacted and did that and this other thing. And now you've been blaming them for the rest of your life. You're a 40-year-old kid who's blaming your parents. Grow up, kind of thing.
Right.
Mark, I can see you needed
group kind of stuff, right?
Exactly, because that's the next influence, right? Is the Primal Scream, is the encounter groups. Some of the people that were there in the very early days were telling me that Werner would meet somebody, a guru, a teacher, leader. I mean, I think he is certainly in the time that I knew him and worked with him, still a very hungry mind. And he would get very enamored with whatever. So if it was Muktananda, then all of a sudden this Eastern stuff would start to seep into his programs. If it was Primal Scream or encounter groups, then that would start to seep into the programs, right? Like, so it was kind of whatever thing came along. He got very enamored in around 2015, in there, but with neuroscience, right? Which in Landmark, we call it brain science, but that's not a real term, people, Landmark people, by the way, it's neuroscience. So neuroscience is, and he flew off and met with some top academics in the field of neuroscience. And it was interesting to watch him even go through that shift, because before that, he would talk in the courses when things would come up that were, I would say, of a spiritual or urethral or a kind of a nature. He always had this really great answer for it about there are things that are above his pay grade, and like that. And then, but he met with the neuroscientists, and then we were delivering a program in Clemson, which is in the South. And there was this big brouhaha came in this one exercise in the program about what is leadership. And some people who are faith-based said servant leadership, that they are servant leaders. And Werner and team were like, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. It's all, it's all stimulus response. It's all, how we behave is all completely. I remember Werner standing there going, it's all the brain. It's all the brain. There's nothing else. It's all the brain. And I remember being kind of sad.
That's a good way to piss off the Christians, right?
Yeah.
Well, but it was also sort of sad because for me, it was sad. He had just come off of a major life-threatening illness, and he was further away from sort of the spiritual solace, I think, that is sometimes needed when we're going through those things. But anyway, okay, so the next thing that AI gave us was controversy. So ways they're different. So Landmark Forum has been accused of being a cult because of its recruitment tactics and attempts to convert participants to a new worldview. However, some religious experts say that Landmark is not a cult because it's secular and has no central leader and tries to unite its participants. The Church of Scientology has been involved in a number of controversies, including allegations of mistreatment of members, its stance on psychiatry, and its aggressive attitude towards critics. So I don't know about you, but I actually saw no daylight there, like between those two, because it's just that I think the information about Landmark's abuses are just starting to get public. They're just starting to come out.
Very much so. But even the AI is missing the boat on cults, because it implies or states there that that it's not a religious activity, therefore it's not a cult. And nobody anywhere ever said cults have to be religious in nature in order to be a cult. A cult is about behavior. It's not about belief. And so that automatically nullifies the AI's answer as far as I'm concerned on that front.
Yeah.
Also saying it's just because of its harsh, or hard sell style recruitment tactics. That's not what makes something a cult. That's one factor in a mosaic of things that makes something cult-like or a cult, right? So, so the AI is missing the boat a little bit on that thing. But the controversies are, of course, very, very real and have been since day one. One interesting thing about Scientology, I thought, in terms of the compare contrast, is that it was around for 25 years before Est even came along.
Yeah.
And so it was a well-developed, already had gone through its bans and its legal battles and a bunch of stuff in the first 25 years of its existence, which I'm sure Werner was paying attention to and learning from as well, and trying to avoid some of those same mishaps. But
and one of those early mishaps was Hubbard deciding this has to be a religion so that we can be tax-free, right? Like, wasn't that part of the brouhaha there?
That's right. There were two reasons why Scientology became that are practical, very obvious answers as to why it became a religion. Practicing medicine without a license was becoming a legal problem for the church, or for Scientology, Dianetics and Scientology, right away. And the tax exemption, right? The fact that you could make all this money and not pay taxes on it. Hubbard. That's Hubbard's wet dream, right? He hated paying taxes. He railed against it constantly in his lectures. So those two things were very, very much in that direction. But it saddles you with other responsibilities and obligations that you have to fulfill, like having a creed and having, symbology and having a worship service and all this other stuff you have to bring into the mix. And when he did that back in the 50s, a lot of people in the Dianetics realm who were very science engineering based were like, this ain't a religion. I'm not doing religion. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And there were a lot of splits along the way. And so that
right, because Dianetics itself, the book itself, wasn't a religious treatise.
No,
right?
Dianetics was presented as a science. But it was after the first two. We don't have to get into the whole thing, but it was only after the first 2 years that it started getting into spiritual stuff, and then they switched over to a religious model. And the reasons were money and rights, right? Because the First Amendment gives you so much air cover. But like I said, it presents its own level of problem too. Yeah. And it was interesting that two of the things that are so parallel to Scientology in modern times, Landmark and Nexium, both had people who decided we're not doing the religious thing, right? They probably looked at the trouble Hubbard had with it and other groups and were like, nah, I think we can do this a different way. But
I'll let the government take a percentage.
That's right. But that decision opened up Keith and Werner to problems that L. Ron Hubbard didn't have to deal with, right? Because he had First Amendment protections, for example. So it's a little bit of a balancing act.
Interesting.
But regardless of any of that, the structure of what all these men were doing was the same from one to the next to the.
And that's the thing to note, right? Like that's both Chris and I are super interested in this. What are all those similarities? What are the patterns? What are the things that are predictable of, that end up in exploitive and abusive behavior is kind of my attention, or, what do we need to learn to look at that we haven't been, or that we've tolerated, or one of my worst things, somebody said this on a Facebook post the other day. It's like, well, everybody's doing it. Well, just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, So it's like, no, that, are we willing to examine even the stuff that everybody's doing? And, Werner and gang, they didn't like taxes either, but they've developed elaborate systems for keeping the money offshore. So, even the way they did business with me was all about getting the profits offshore so that they weren't taxable. So anyway, same game, different.
Also, didn't your mother tell you at some point, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you do it? Like that's literally like straight out of the mother's playbook for a rebellious teen. But mom, everyone's doing it.
No, my mom was deep into their starving children somewhere.
Argument for people to use.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
but everyone does it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the ex-cult experience is an awful lot of aha moments of, of like realizing all these things that we just kind of buy into during our lives that are just total nonsense. But but it enables these predators, and so and groupthink is absolutely one of the sort of levers of power that they use to manipulate us. So it's called social proof, right? Cialdini talks about it in Influence.
Yeah.
If everybody else is doing it, we're hardwired to buy that. Okay, it's valid.
Yeah.
5 other people are doing it.
In the advanced course, they call that agreement reality, right? We all create
Scientology, right? Reality is agreement,
us, right?
One of my favorite books, I don't know I can't remember the author, but it's called What Makes Your Brain Happy and Why to Do the Opposite. And it's written by a journalist, and it's like if you want to get up to probably about 10 or 15 years ago, I read it then, so it must be a little bit older than that. But if you want to get like a quick encapsulation of what we've learned in neuroscience, certainly through the 90s and the early 2000s. It's a really, really great book about that. But basically the point that author makes is that the brain is using so much energy and so much calories, and it basically needs every shortcut it can get. So it's burning the most energy, the most calories. So it's constantly, the brain itself is shortcutting. Okay. So, guys in black shirts with air, they're safe. Great. Don't have to worry about that. So, and almost all of our computing is happening below the level of consciousness. So the brain is doing all this work and it wants shortcuts. Shortcuts are the best for the brain. So, and you can see this, I think, that's what I think social proof is ultimately about, is like, well, I trust Chris. So if Chris says it's okay, then it's got to be okay. Then I don't have to go do the work to figure out if that product is safe or okay for me. I have to,
and you add in like the new social media part of it, and it's just accelerated, right?
Memes.
This guy said it. Oh, look, he has a million followers. Oh my God, everyone's doing the demure meme now. So that must be a thing now, right? So we have to all, wow, it's like, it's real now. Like, there's value in it because everyone else said that there's value in it.
Right. Never mind that most of those are bots.
Other, right.
Like literal bots.
Or even if it is just something that got popular, it's like, no one stops to go, but is it valid? It's just everyone's agreeing, but is it valid? Right. And you have the one voice going, wait a minute, actually, I've done some thought, and shut up, man. Don't harsh our mellow,
Have you ever noticed that the trajectory of almost every fad is it doesn't exist, right? It's kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It gets it goes swinging, super popular. Yeah. And it doesn't then stop and just go back.
It starts with the cool kids, though.
It goes over here where people hate it.
Oh yeah, it swings the other way.
Right? Today's hero is tomorrow's zero, right? There's this backlash that happens to it. We love the word backlash.
Don't you think that's the cancel whole thing too, right? Yeah. Like today's hero is tomorrow's,
It becomes popular to love a thing. Well, Hamilton, right? Everybody couldn't get enough of it. They wouldn't shut up about it. And then now...
What's wrong with Hamilton? What happened to Hamilton?
No matter who you
there's nothing wrong with it. He's talking about how it was hard to, it was the hard ticket to get. Only the cool kid. Listen, if you live in New York and you saw it at the Public Theater off Broadway, right? And I'm also a theater person, right? So like if you saw it in the Public Theater off Broadway, you were the coolest of cool kids, because the moment that a cool show announces its transfer to Broadway, you're like, I've already seen it. I saw it downtown.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't even say, you just say downtown. I saw it downtown. And then it transfers to Broadway, and it's the hard ticket. This is Oh Mary is dealing with this right now. There's a play called Oh Mary. This is about Mary Todd Lincoln, and it's this guy in drag, and she's like, it's insane, right? It's the funniest thing ever. But and then that was with Hamilton, right? It transferred to Broadway. Everyone wanted a ticket. You couldn't get it. Hillary Clinton shows up. Oh my God, everyone needs to go, right? And it's the hot ticket to get. And then, a couple years in later, everyone's seen it. All the people who are in New York have seen it. All the tourists now have started to see it. It goes on Disney Plus. Everyone watches it. Like every little kid can rap every single song from it. And then what Chris is talking about, the backlash of like, oh God, Hamilton all the time, everywhere. It's all Hamilton, right?
That's right.
What we're going to get with Demure and Brat, right?
That's right.
There's going to be a backlash in the fall for Brat and Demure, right? It's like, oh God, you're so passe if you use the word Demure.
That's right. That's what's going to happen. Because it always follows that swing, right?
It sort of feels like that's what happened to us.
It's always some marginalized person who makes them popular to begin with. And it's always black or trans people who make them popular. And then when white suburban kids start using it, it's not cool anymore. And it's like, oh my God, stop.
That's right.
All right. There's a whole show just on that. Okay, there was one more, and then I think there's one more thing from the AI that I'll just mention briefly. We've touched on it, and then Mark, I think what we should do is take a few questions from the audience about Scientology and Landmark, and then we'll do a break, and then we'll get into weaponized impact.
Perfect.
What do you think?
Yeah. So right now is the time for everyone who's with us in our live audience to type in some questions that you have for Chris, about anything that we talked about in the first part of our conversation. But then Anne's going to talk about the last element.
Yeah. So the last element that it brought up was beliefs. Landmark Forum helps people frame life in a new way so they can relate to it with more freedom and power. Totally off the Landmark website. Anyway, Scientologists believe that humans are spiritual beings with infinite abilities that they may not yet realize. What is hilarious about that is, as a Landmark leader, that was all we would say is like, no, you're whole, complete, and perfect, but with barriers to that expression. And we're here to help you with the barriers to that expression. And then when you remove those barriers, though, don't worry, there's always more barriers because there's always more courses to buy. So those kind of go together. But the whole... Humans are spiritual beings. We didn't have, it's like Landmark has took all the spiritualism out, which knowing Werner, I can get. Like, I think he didn't, he has a whole religious background with his dad. They were Jewish. Dad converted to some kind of, evangelical Christian something, and then they had a very religious household that by all accounts seems like it was pretty abusive. So I think he really left all the religion, spiritual stuff. But he did what is infused or was infused in Landmark was this kind of idea that not that we're spiritual beings, but that we are perfect beings with barriers to the expression. That's how it would have been said in Landmark. What do you think of the whole belief system in Scientology as contrasted?
Yeah, I mean, it nails it as far as how Scientology approaches it, because you are an immortal spiritual being who is a god, basically, right? You could create all of this at will if you so desired, kind of thing, but you hold yourself back spiritually and your powers because of the accumulated trauma and wrongdoings of the millennia that you have been around. That's Scientology's pitch, basically. So, and that they have the only methodology to remove all that trauma, remove all your past life crap, and get you, focused and powerful and immortal, aware of your own spiritual and personal immortality. So it's kind of the biggest carrot you could give.
Wait, how do I get to be immortal? That's awesome. Maybe I should rethink this Scientology thing.
You are immortal already. You've been kicking around for.
Oh, of course, in other lives and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You 4 quadrillion years.
Okay.
That's how old this universe is, according to Scientology.
So the billion-year contract is just like doing a summer internship or something.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Wow.
That's exactly how we thought about it. That's exactly crazy. How we thought about it.
Yeah. And one thing that I want to point out is that the interesting thing, so I love it that the AI has come up with these comparisons, right? Because, I think I've said this before, AI is a really misnomer term at this point in our development, because it's not artificial intelligence. There's nothing intelligent about what we're calling, the chat GPT and stuff like that. It's machine learning. Right. So all it does is it reads everything on the internet and smushes it together and goes, okay, this is the consensus that I can understand. And it's so fast. This is faster than us. Right. It takes us years to gather that amount of information. Right. It can do it in a few seconds. Yeah. So all it's doing is repackaging other stuff. So you say it literally that comes straight from the website, and then it sees 12 other websites where people have written that very same thing, probably because they heard it at the source, at the main part. And that's like, okay, well, so consensus is this is the principle. I'm going to say this is important, right? And that's when the AI, the chatbot, is going to put it up there, right? And I think it's interesting that so many of these pursuits, let's say, whether it's Landmark or NXIVM or any of the million of other seminars, they all did have at some point they all had some touch with L. Ron Hubbard and his stuff, because he was early, as Chris pointed out, right? So it makes sense that, okay, they're all going to have an element of this. And then everything that the chat GPT gathers is going to say, look, everyone's saying the same thing. They all must have these connections, right?
That's right. That's right. And here's how. Let me say this real fast, because I want your audience to know this, or at least consider this idea. It is sometimes a reality, sometimes true, that cult leaders will study other cult leaders. That is absolutely true. Jim Jones did it. L. Ron Hubbard did it. But they don't always do that, and they don't have to, because there's only so many ways to go about controlling people or manipulating people. It's a list. It's not a long list of ways to do it. And if you dedicate your life like a predator does, like L. Ron Hubbard or a Werner does, this is all they spend their time doing, is they watch and figure out how to do this. And when you spend years and years and years messing with people and doing this on purpose, and nobody knows what you're actually up to, you can figure it out. How do you play on people's confirmation bias? How do you weaponize their empathy? How do you get them into a state of bliss, of happiness, right? It's really not that hard to do. These kinds of things, right? How do you do these things? And once you figure it out, then you figure out your spin on it as the predator, whether it's a religious angle or a seminar angle. You look in the culture, basically, is what they tend to do, and find popular things and jump on them and then blow it up, right? Which is why we see nowadays, quantum healing and this kind of crap, right? Well, it's only because of quantum physics that we even think about words like that, right?
Right.
It's a sexy term.
So they'll build on this, but I just wanted to make the point that there really are only so many ways to go about doing what these guys do, and they spend years figuring it out, and that's how it evolves. That's pretty much how it goes most of the time.
It's a game. It's kind of a game. I mean, I spent a lot of time, from 2012, well, really 2010 to 2019, for several months a year, hanging out in the kind of close inner circle world of Werner. And one of the things I'm a fascinated people watcher. I've been a people watcher since I was 11. This is why I would actually make an excellent cult leader. We could start our own cult, Chris. So, because I do that, I watch people and I'm like, why are they doing that? Why? And it is absolutely, utterly fascinating to me. Werner's like that. Yeah. Like, he is like that. And a lot of the purpose of his immediate staff is they are his guinea pigs. Now, unfortunately, he has an illness that's in there. And I think Hubbard had the same. I mean, there's some evidence he had bipolar disorder. He had some kind of an illness. And that's what I believe of Werner, is Werner has an illness, a mental illness. And that sort of skews everything. So, because because then that abuse tactics get in there. And, not to mention he's a bit of a product of his time, in the, this is something else I was going to ask you about. I wasn't going to ask you here, but something for us to bookmark, Chris, because I know you would nerd out on this with me, is I want to learn about all the CIA stuff that was coming out in the 50s and 60s and how that interplays. Because I know it's in here. All the CIA
that is
brainwashing
a whole conversation.
I know. Okay, bookmark Mark's like next episode. But we got to do some serious, because it's in there. I can see it. I'm starting to see it a lot more. So, Mark, do we have some before we kind of go into our next part?
Some really great.
Okay, great.
Yeah, some great questions.
I know our audience has some.
One of them is curious about infiltration of members into the IRS or political organizations for the purpose of influencing on a bigger level. I know that is a huge topic that you could talk about within the history of Scientology, but give us a little snippet.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hubbard in the 1960s got very, very, very paranoid. Very paranoid, and with good reason. The governments of the world were investigating Scientology, and his back was against a wall. It had been, we don't have to get into all the specifics. It's just Hubbard was feeling it. And so from that point forward, he started developing a lot of conspiracy theories, which he was feeding to Scientologists about how psychiatry and the world governments and world media were operating in collusion to take down Scientology. As a result, the only possible solution to this was to infiltrate these groups and sort of deal with the bad news and bad information and false reports. This was Hubbard's whole take on this, was that they were going to go in and they were going to clean up the government files in the UK, in Canada, in America, in Spain, right? They were going to do this massive operation.
Fix the lies.
Years long. It was called Operation Snow White. Ooh. And or Snow White,
more double speak, right?
Yeah, well, Snow White. We're gonna make everything clean, right? And pure as snow. Yeah. And because of course Hubbard could convince his followers. The truth is that L. Ron Hubbard is an innocent soul who was being persecuted, right? That's the whole point of the conspiracy theories. He spent years developing that stuff.
Another big red flag. If your guru is being persecuted, red flag, red flag, red flag. Yeah.
It's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt.
That's right. And so in the 1970s, that enabled the creation in the 60s and 70s of an internal spy network. And I don't use those words lightly. I'm talking a full-blown subunit of the Church of Scientology. It was called the Guardian's Office. And they infiltrated IRS offices, government offices, as employees. They actually went in there, working for the guys or doing other sneaky stuff until they all got busted. 1977, the FBI started figuring things out. The IRS started figuring things out. And 11 people in total, including L. Ron Hubbard's wife, who was at the head of this spy network, they all went to jail. It was bad.
Wow.
It was bad. Mary Sue was in jail for like 4 years or something. Got out in the 1980s. and never talked to Hubbard again. He threw her under the bus. He threw all of them under the bus, right? Because he was the unindicted co-conspirator. He never was indicted.
I was just going to say that we know someone else who will use you and then throw you under the bus, but we're not going to say his name because that's not what this is about.
Got it.
Yeah.
It's a common, actually. Tactic, it's not, right? I mean, and that's what I think is so, like, that's the gift of the times we're living in, and being able to have shows like this and conversations like this is because we can start to educate ourselves what this stuff looks like. It's always been around, true. And we've ignored it, we've tolerated it, or we haven't recognized it, or we thought it was an exception. It was this this one thing, and then we put that person in jail. That's not enough. That's why I'm really passionate. We have to educate ourselves as consumers more. We're never going to get rid of all the sociopathic, narcissistic, domineering, abusive, blah, 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 whatever, throw in whatever term you want. Leaders, we have to educate ourselves and learn how to armor and guard ourselves and our own autonomy and our own rights from this kind of stuff. But we have to recognize it first. So anyway, that's really, really great. That's wild. Landmark's boring.
So we have another really cool question. Here's another cool question.
What do we got?
Mark, can you tell Chris about the recreation exercise in the Power to Create course? Scientology have a very similar exercise in their communication course, and ask him what he thinks happens to us when we're able to pass. So I see you nodding, so you know a little bit about this, but for our listeners, in the advanced communication course, the second communication course, which is called the Power to Create, there's an exercise where you recreate another person. And in Landmark speak, the recreation is the ability to completely get someone's communication without adding anything or taking anything away from it in such a way that the other person is fully gotten. Like, they're like, you get me. You really get what it's like. So I might be angry and upset, yelling and screaming. And if you just, but if you try to rationalize with me, I just get more and more upset, right? But if you just get everything about the experience, you hear every word, you're clear on what's upset me, and you really get the upset behind it, and you fully get it. That's, they say, the power of recreation, right? So there's this exercise that initiates it, that kind of gives people a sense of it, and you literally just repeat back and forth. You say one thing, you say the person says it back. You say this thing, they says it back, and eventually you get to the point where if the person passes, you get in communication. So we look each other in the eyes, and you say the things, and you say it back and forth until such time as you go, yeah, you're in communication. Like, you got everything that I was saying, even the unspoken part of it, right?
Can I insert what Werner would say?
Which takes place in just like a half hour, right? You there should be a click where you pass. Yeah, and go ahead.
Well, I'll just insert, because Werner talked with us about that, not in that specific exercise. I didn't lead the communication course, but he said you were in communication when you got whatever a person was sharing with you as they experienced it, as they saw it. So you were I'm so in Chris's world that I'm getting, this is a perfect setup for our empathy conversation, that I'm getting what it's like for Chris fully and completely. And Werner used to say this was the magic, because he had a little consulting gig where he did some work with Protestants and Catholics in Ireland. And that was very miraculous for him. But he said that was the thing, is he was able to recreate them so that they so got each other, and they could see it, and then they could find common ground. So anyway, but that's Werner would say it as,
they always say that
you get that other person, as you get what they're dealing with as they see it, not as you see it. So it's not just getting the thing, you have to get how they're seeing and experiencing it.
And in the colloquial way of saying it, it's they get gotten, right? I am gotten by you. Like, you get everything. And it's a weird kind of,
we love the whole I got it thing in the Werner world.
I know. Gotcha. I got it. Oh, she got me. Oh man, she really gets me. It's like there's a lot of getting happening, right? Anyway, so Chris, what do you think? What are there similarities?
There are so many right now. My mind is racing, and I actually have to ask you now if you've noticed, since you've met me or watched me, that I use the term or phrase, I get that. I get you. I get it. Do you hear me say that a lot?
I haven't, but now
Not
I will.
A lot, but a little bit. Yeah.
Notice because of what you just said, because I do use that a lot. And the reason I do, because it's a very, very, very common Scientology phrase, because it's called, the exercise is different in Scientology, but the purpose is the same. This is part of what are called the TRs in Scientology. which
and
you've
that's
heard
another
of, I'm
question
sure.
that showed up in the chat. Yeah.
Right. You have drills or exercises in communication. Everybody talks a lot about the one that really kind of messes with your head, which is the 0 series of drills where you're staring at somebody else for hours on end. But there are more drills than that. After you get through those, there's these communication drills where you utter a phrase and the person has to hear you. They have to be able to hear you. And if they can't hear you, they don't get it, right? So that's a flunk.
And Chris, what does TR stand for? What
training
does the
routine.
Abbreviation stand for?
Training routine.
Oh, okay, got it.
Or training regimen.
See there, I just did it. I said got it.
So, now all my attention is going to be on my acknowledgments now. But one of the TRs, TR2, there's TRs 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And TR2 is about acknowledgments. And the purpose of an acknowledgement in Scientology is very controlling. It's a specific thing that Scientologists are trained to do with communication so that they can guide and control any communication that they're part of. And acknowledgments are a very, very, very important part of this, because an acknowledgement is not just I heard you or I received your communication. It is I got it in such a way that you have been fully duplicated and understood over here.
Yeah, that's Werner's thing.
Totally and completely, so that my acknowledgement not only ends your desire to continue to communicate to me about that thing you just said, like you get it, I understand, but it actually stops that whole communication, what they call a communication cycle in Scientology, so that the person who is using that acknowledgement is actually controlling the communication. So this is why sometimes Scientologists will be forceful or stressful in their acknowledgments, that it's not just, oh, I get that, or I heard you. It's, I got that.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I hear you. You are understood.
Wow. So interesting that in with
utterly. Right? Like this these are Scientology.
I have done this. I am like, oh my gosh. I didn't realize I was controlling, but I can totally see it when you say it that way. And I just
it's for. This is trained into Scientologists. The communication's not just back and forth of ideas, it's a way of controlling a person.
Wow.
That's interesting, because in the communication courses, again, there is this notion that you are disappearing the upset or disappearing the miscommunication, right? So that when you fully recreate someone, I get everything about Anne's upset and everything that she said and didn't say and all of that. And I really fully get it. And she gets that I got it. It disappears. We go, oh, wow, some person gets me. So it disappears the thing, right?
That's right.
It's sold as... Yeah, but in Landmark, though, it's definitely sold as, oh, we're just going to all, it's kind of more kumbaya, like, oh, we're all going to just disappear the difference, and then we're going to see into each other's eyes and see where we're exactly the same and all this. And it's not sold as a control. And in fact, they say in their communication course that it's not about control or domination, that it's really about, like, we're going to see each other eye to eye, and we're going to just get each other, and then that's going to disappear whatever difference is between us, right? I mean, it's never talked about as any kind of control mechanism.
Understood on the control part, but it's everything you just said plus it's a control mechanism. So you get all the good that you just talked about, right? This wonderful feeling, including, and I wasn't going to go there because it seems a little esoteric, but since you said it, I'll go there, that it is about making that communication cycle disappear. It's so well understood that it just disappears itself. There's nothing lingering. There's no stuck attention or, but wait, there's none of that. It's done. Yeah. You have
and it's easy to see how you can really manipulate that, right? Like how it's easy for someone who's masterful at this to completely manipulate any situation, right?
Well, yes and no. Let me tell you a story about something that opened my eyes to this in the biggest way. And this was not long ago. This was only a couple of years ago when it really hit me. I was having the hardest time talking to my wife from time to time because she would want to get a lot of stuff off her chest or express her feelings. And being who my wife is, she just wanted to rant. She just wanted to talk, right? She's got a problem. She wants me to hear about it. But I would understand the problem within 10 seconds of her communicating to me about it. I get
You're
it.
such a man.
Right?
You're such a
Exactly.
guy.
Hey, I do that too. I was just going to tell the same story about my husband. You go, Chris. I was like, this doesn't work in relationships.
Energy, right? It's not about literal gender. It's about your feminine energy versus your.
I say to my husband all the time, I'm like, you're saying that for like the 10th time. Is there something I didn't get? What do you need me to get? But my real communication is, what do you need me to get so you will stop talking?
I just want you to understand.
That's what I,
yeah.
Punchline.
Yeah. I want to solve the problem so you don't have, so it doesn't come up again.
Yes. Oh my God. You guys get me.
I do.
Yeah, because we all have masculine energy.
No, it's because we've been in Scientology and human.
Finally, I have been understood. Yes, that is exactly what would happen. But here's the problem, right? My wife wasn't talking to me to be understood, to solve the problem. She wanted somebody as a sounding board. She wanted somebody to just listen, not understand.
I'll work this out on my own. Just be here. Yeah.
And it wasn't about, oh, you get me. It was, I got a lot of shit to tell you, and here it comes, right? And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that.
It's auditory processing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's where, like, in my wisdom leading, that was what I became an expert in, was actually just learning how to listen without adding anything and letting it go through. But I'm not always available for that, which is something I try to explain to people in my life from time to time. I'm like, no. You gotta, like, because I'm not, it takes something to get into that space. Right. But yeah, the whole point was just listen so that people can sort themselves out, which is, this is where I think I avoided a lot of the poison that I'm now learning about that is in Landmark that I really didn't know because I was over in, Happy Land here in the wisdom area. But in part because in the wisdom area, we really were clear that we were not the source of people's transformation. If anything, what Brian taught us, we were blessed to be in this space and ask questions so people could find their own insights, breakthroughs, transformation. It was never us that was the source.
Part of
it was always them, but I now understand that's not the way it is in the more the centers division, the more secular aspects of Landmark. It's more
a little different.
Yeah, go ahead. Do you have a couple?
And by the way, we have questions? A clarification. Well, we have clarification on that question actually,
okay.
And I'm glad that she in. She said, Mark, I was meaning, so I guess she had that question and I took it to mean the recreation exercise. What she meant was the group yelling the communication you can't be with until you get it. That is another aspect of that course, is literally you would say, what's the communication you can't be with? I can't be with someone being weepy and crying and and when someone comes to me, oh, I'm so sorry. So that they would literally have the people being that way with the whole room would say,
so you desensitize them?
I'm late on my thing, and that just drives me crazy, right? So they would have to do that until I could just be with it and not react to it. Like there would be zero reaction, and then that was when you would get the in communication.
Oh my God, our trauma therapists are going insane right now.
To hear it, like I could just hear that. Yeah, well, no, seriously, because like in some cases it's yelling and screaming. Most of the case, with a lot of the, let's say, with a lot of the younger female participants, they would say, I can't have anyone be standing over me and pointing and screaming really loud, and so they'd say, who's the biggest guy in the room, right? I mean, this is so like just standard.
Well, let's throw you into your fear,
right? In the room, right? The biggest guy in the room would go up there and would literally get right in your face and yell and scream at you with the microphone, full volume, pointing down at you until you could just, I can be with this communication. And I think half the time people were just like, I'm going to pretend until I get over with, so this is done.
Yeah, freeze until it goes and see if you survive.
And then they have full trauma response later. Oh, look, she's in communication. Oh, yay, she could be with that communication. And it's like, no, you just yelled and screamed at her and she tolerated it, so she could get the hell out of here.
Yep.
Yep.
There's a whole drill again in the TRs, in the TR0 series, which is exactly that exercise, but it's one-on-one, not a group. So it's you're sitting across from somebody and it's called bull bait, as in baiting.
Bull, like as in, right?
Yeah. And what you do is you literally can say, anything to this person.
Mm.
Anything. And the idea is and they don't necessarily tell you what their buttons are. You're looking for their buttons, as they put it in Scientology terms. So you have to find those buttons, and you have to what they call flatten them, meaning they produce no response, not even a little blink, not even your eyes, dilating, nothing.
Right.
No response. And you keep hammering the person.
No vein on the side of your neck pulses or anything like that.
Yeah, you got to flatten those buttons. Wow. And it doesn't matter what the buttons are. I sat in classrooms, because this is a classroom exercise. You do this, there's other people around hearing it, but they're doing their own classwork. So you're sitting there getting bull baited. And sometimes in a really good bull baiting with a coach who really is quite good, you can get these stand-up routines. They're just sitting there saying all this funny stuff and the whole room is busting up. But other times it can be yelling, screaming, grief-inducing, fear-inducing. It doesn't matter what you say as the coach. If it's a button, it has to be flattened. And this can go on for hours because the coach has to find the buttons. The person doesn't offer them up. So you have to keep doing this drill until there's no reaction of any kind, even when, at the highest levels of doing this drill, even when the coach is clapping right in front of your face. No blink, no reaction, right?
Totally desensitized.
Not even a physiological, not even the basic physiological, like there's wind in my eyes, so I'm going to blink.
Nope.
Wow.
Can't have any of that.
Yowza.
Yeah. They don't use props or do other things like that. It's just two people sitting in a chair. But you can kind of come up on the person. You can make like you're going to hit them. You can do stuff, but you can't actually, you're not supposed to actually touch the other person. It doesn't say don't touch them, but beyond poking or a little shaking, you can't really like assault the person. But short of that, anything goes.
I'm picturing like a drill sergeant, right? Like in every drill sergeant movie, there's a drill sergeant up in your face, little girl.
Well, that's the Full Metal Jacket. The
misogynistic things. Like, and the guy's just having to stand there. Yes, sir. Sir, yes, sir. With no reaction or whatever. Yeah.
Which, look, if you're sending me into war where people are going to be shooting at me, that's probably a skill worth developing. But if what you're sending me into is an effective communication with my wife or my spouse, that's probably a little overkill. All right.
A little bit.
Yeah. I want to be able to have a conversation with Karen in accounting and not freak out, right?
Yeah. Let me throw out there, by the way, that to compare this to exposure therapy or treatment would be a false equivalency, because in a therapeutic environment, because people might hear this and go, oh, that's just like exposure therapy or something. I want to kill that dead. Exposure therapy is an ethically guided process that a therapist is doing with a person who is licensed and has to answer to ethical boards, and they can't go and push a person beyond where they should be pushed, and they're trained to do this. It's not lay people messing with other lay people's minds at the direction of a predator, right? So exposure therapy is something that is studied, is understood, is like a process. This is not that, and I just wanted to put that out there for the audience.
Good point. Very good point. Yeah. Well, so we could go on and on with millions of questions, but I think our time for this episode is up, and I'd like to just thank you, Chris, for being with us today. We're going to continue the conversation, and we're really going to get into the meat of what we have meant to be here with today, which is the idea of weaponizing empathy. So again, if we're glad that people have heard this part, you're going to need this to get to the next part, because it lays the background and the groundwork. So thank you so much, Chris, for being with us today. Everyone, thank you. Like and subscribe, as they say, and share with your friends. Let them know. People are on all aspects and all points along their own healing journey or deconstruction of their experience. Some people are listening to this because they have people in their lives that are dealing with some kind of having participated in something that maybe it was like made you look sideways. And so you might be listening to this. This will give you some tools to support the people in your lives with this. And so we're really grateful for everyone who's involved in the conversation. And as always, these are our opinions and our thoughts and our experiences. We're not speaking on behalf of anyone else, and we're certainly not speaking to malign anyone, but to educate people about these characteristics. So this has been Confronting the Line, and we'll see you next time.